Really excited to have Chris here today. Barb Tobias, who many of you know, one of our board members, had attended some seminar series with Chris and was just effusive in her praise and thought how wonderful his ideas were. So we're glad to be trying something different. We've never addressed a topic like this, so thank you for coming. Chris Turley is an architect, builder, and professor, an entrepreneur committed to transforming people's lives by guiding them to their own inspiring vision for their future and then creating spaces that pull them into that future. Chris is a native Chicagoan with experience in many types of projects, ranging from hospitals and train stations to single-family homes and small commercial storefronts. He is the founder of separate architectural and construction firms and is an adjunct professor of architecture. He is a board member with Community Partners for Affordable Housing, does many presentations on design for the special needs community, and Coach Chris has a ball rooting for both the Sox and Cubs at Buddy Baseball in Buffalo Grove. If you rooted for the Cubs last night, you're all bleary-eyed this morning. Only won, so I guess it was worth it. Today, Chris will speak on a recent renovation project for a group home in the northern suburbs. This project is noteworthy in its intense focus on the specific and considerable needs of the initial occupant, Tommy, the clever solutions created in a collaborative team, and the implementation of the design using off-the-shelf materials. And as a side note, Tommy's house is one of our info tours in March. So everything you see today, you can see in person at our info tour in March. So please help me welcome Chris Turley.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. And the program that Barb Tobias attended is something we called Collaborating on a Dream. It's still in its initial formulation. We've had it's a 4-part series, and it really kind of takes people through the process that I would normally go through with folks on the design of their home. We sort of start at the design or the pre-design form, state, and work our way through, each individually, right, until we get to the end. So we've done 2 of them so far. We're hoping this will be a regular series. It's really the same process I use on all my projects, except that it's sort of customized for the special needs community. And for me, the special needs community is technically everybody, because I have this philosophy that everybody, is disabled to some degree, right? We're all born disabled, and before we die, we're often disabled, and many times in our lives, we have illnesses or pregnancy or, aging or whatever it is, right? And so in my view, and a lot of other people's view, we're all disabled. But in a sense, disability is the normal state of affairs. So for us, the Collaborating on a Dream series is geared towards the more immediate and urgent special needs, right? But it is part of the same process we use for all our projects. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through a project. So I thought what would be useful is to talk about the process that we use, all right? Now, the process I use has over 1,000 checklist line items, right? So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give you the summary. This is not going to be an excruciating PowerPoint. Well, it may be excruciating, but it's not that one. And so we're going to go through this list. And what is the process, the overview of the process that we use. And there are a couple things in there that may be different than you expect, may do things in the same, different order. So this isn't rocket science. This is stuff that you would probably do anyway, but there are some little tricks in there that we invert a few things, because what we know is that if people make certain decisions too early, either they go down a blind alley and they have to come back out, right? It just, it's a decision that either is going to cost them too much money or it's going to result in something that they don't actually want. So we kind of do certain things in a certain order. We're going to focus on the design portion and not the rest of the project today. And what we're going to do is use Tommy's house as an example of it. Now, I want to caution you. This is a house for a very specific individual. You know how they say, if you know one person with autism, you know one person with autism. Everybody's different. Well, even more so, every architectural project is different, right? And so a lot of the stuff won't apply to you. All right, it's for somebody who had rather profound effect of autism, right? And they had very specific habits and ways of, of behaviors. And so we designed specifically for that. So I encourage you not to look at the specific solutions. What I do encourage you to do is look at the process we used to get to that design, right? And the overall concepts. And we're going to challenge a little bit of myths and misconceptions that we come up against. Now, I have a list here, and some people may get a little frustrated with that list, right? Because they think that maybe I'm saying that everybody has that. That's not the case. This is what I've heard from a lot of people. This is a collection, right, of misconceptions, beliefs, and other things, right? So be kind to me. But because we really do need to talk about it because it affects the end result of the project. If it applies to you, great, and if it doesn't, great, okay? So this is the founding principle of my firm and of all my work. So, and for me, this is an architect named Sam Mockbee. He's deceased by about 10 years. And he just had this sort of grassroots design belief. You know, he was a champion of the soul. And for me, this means so much because it's every person, and rich, you know, I break this down. Rich or poor is not, you know, a financial thing. It's about every person, no matter what their situation, no matter what their soul. Every person, no matter what their situation in life, deserves a shelter for the soul. And architects are very, very good, and builders are very, very good at building shelters for the body. And that's not enough. And so when we talk about deserves a shelter for the soul, it goes beyond, I need a handicapped bathroom, right? And it goes into not just every person, like in this case, somebody with special needs. It goes to everybody who enters the building. And I gotta tell you, my clients who have special needs are the toughest clients I've ever had. I've dealt with litigators, I've dealt with everything you can imagine, doctors and store owners and entrepreneurs and you know, by far, special needs are the toughest. And the reason is, first of all, you've heard no so many times. You guys are battle weary. You know, you've just been at it for so long. And for some people, nothing is possible anymore. But the biggest problem I have is that you guys don't take care of yourselves. Like, you give so much to the person in your family who has a special need that you don't take care of yourself. And when we're designing, the goal is every person, like you included. You're allowed to have the life you want. And we have to deal with other things too. And so it's really hard sometimes for me as the designer to have my clients stop and say, here's something I want. I need a retreat. I need a place to go. I need a place not to be mom or sister or father, right? I need a place in my own home where I could be who I want to be. And we also have to take care of the caregivers and the family and the friends. It's a community that we're building. I'm going to say this, and this is this is something that architects would look at me with, you know, a cocked head and like, what did he say? Buildings don't matter. The buildings don't matter at all. It's the lives that occur in them, the lives they make possible in them. The building itself is irrelevant, right? And I love buildings. I love a beautiful building. But I could do beautiful buildings that aren't really fit for human condition, you know, for people to live in. What's the point of that? What matters is you guys, and you have to take care of yourself and everybody else. So one of my biggest challenges is keeping my clients focused on every person. Every person. We have to solve all these other problems. I'm not saying that we don't. It's a bigger game that we're playing. And with somebody who's battle weary, it's sometimes hard to make that, you know, to get them out of that because they don't want to give up on it because they've been at it so long. And I get it. And we have to. Your opportunity is to find the inspiration. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about during this project, is what inspired the house. Now, we'll talk about a lot of technical stuff, but what inspired the house? The inspiration is the power that is what creates the project. being inspired. When I start to feel like a project is kind of losing its focus, its forward progress, it's because of inspiration. It's because we lost track of it. We have to recreate it. The process is what people often go for first, like, how do I get this done, right? But if they don't have the inspiration, then the process doesn't really lead you to success. You'll end up with a project, but it may not be what you want, or it may use 100% of the budget and maybe only do 80% of what you want. So inspiration is what keeps us charging forward and not giving up, not giving in until we get what we want. And so we'll talk about process. And we have this thing called the life of deprivation that we deal with. That's the best term I could come up with it. And that is, for certain individuals, they have lived this life. This is part of that battle-weary thing. They've lived a life where they keep hearing no, there isn't enough money, there isn't enough space, there isn't a, right? And they've deprived themselves. They've actually gotten really good at it, like really, really good. I don't know if we've ever met somebody who got better and better at living with less money, right? Or less of something. And they get so good at it, but they're erasing their margins, they're getting themselves in a more and more risky position. And then if something bad happens, there's no resources left. They've gotten too good at that kind of survival. And so it's living in this world of deprivation instead of living in a world of inspiration. And I know that sounds like, oh, that's all fine and good, but I don't have funding from the state. You know, I get that. And fighting for the funding for the state is easier if you can inspire a lot of people. And it's not easy. I'm not pretending it is. This is the Milwaukee Museum of Art. And I use this as an example. Thank you for whoever said that. I'm deaf in one ear, so I can't hear where sound comes from. So oh, you said that. Okay, thank you. So the reason I pulled this together, if you're familiar with Milwaukee Museum of Art before this was built, right? Nobody knows, right? Because nobody went there. You would go in there, and other than the guards, it was virtually a vacant building, right? And they built this next to it. The other museum is just next to it. And it's by Eliel Saarinen. It's a Saarinen building. That's a big name in my world. And nobody went there, right? But they built this. Somebody had an inspired notion, and they built this. And they built this in the right position, the right way, and made it so that people were inspired by it. Now, the interesting thing is, this building has no gallery space. It has visiting show space, but the rest of it are things like bookstores, bathrooms, cafe, parking, all the kind of ancillary things, but almost no gallery space. They didn't really increase the size of the museum, if you will, just the display space. And yet, they've increased the business in the downtown Milwaukee area by 40%. It's huge. They have almost 500,000 visitors a year. Now that's a good number for a museum that was virtually vacant. So that's what inspiration can do. And if you've ever seen it, has anybody not seen this? Yeah, okay. So there's a bridge right there. So I forget what time it occurs. Is it at noon? But these wings here, they actually fold down over that glass, and they open. And so if you're standing on that bridge, you can actually see it from the end as it goes, you know. It's very cool. It's very cool. Moving buildings, awesome, right, in my world. Buildings that move when you want them to. That's really awesome. So that's what inspiration in architecture. Once they got that design, funding happened, right? Because inspiration can propel a project. All right, misconceptions. I got lots of unsolvable problems. Special and expensive materials and technology is required, okay? So unsolvable problems would be things like, in Tommy's house, we have to provide a way for the people to get out during a fire, right? It's the law. And we had an elopement issue, right? Elopement, you know the term, where the resident wants to get out a window and run down the block, all right, which is very dangerous for a lot of reasons. So those are contradictory needs, right? How do I solve that? We had special and expensive materials and technology is required. No, you'll see that this project, all off-the-shelf products except for one thing, off the shelf. You can get them at Home Depot. Your house can't be used. That may or may not be true, but sometimes people are like, I can't do it here. And sometimes we can. Simple projects are complex and expensive. Now, I can't tell you how much this project cost. So I will tell you this. Most people look at the project and say, I can't afford that. And that's it, conversation over. And when I ask them, how much did that project cost? If you just looked at it and said, how much, they're like $500,000 for that renovation, $600,000, $800,000. And I can't tell you, it's a private project, so I can't, divulge too much. But I can tell you, I've done kitchens more expensive than this project. Nice kitchens, but kitchens, okay? So it's not $300,000 and up. It's considerably less. Does that help? So and this was a major project, right? Not everybody, again, don't forget, I'm not proposing everybody do a $300,000 project. That's not what you just heard. What you heard is this is a really aggressive project, and we did it way less than 300, way less, okay? So the obstacles in the road, and you know what NIMBY is, right? Not in my backyard. We had a little bit of that, but not much. It just didn't become an issue. Okay. Cost overruns and problems, that occurs on all my projects, not just the ones for special needs. Building a qualified team is hard sometimes. I have time. Nobody has time. Even on this project where they started way early, we were 2 months delayed getting him in, and it was a problem. And then I can't afford anything. All right. So who is Tommy? So Tommy's about my size, so not a small individual. And a lot more fit than I was at 22. And in 2015, he was aging out. And so he's profoundly affected by autism. We'll go over some of the behaviors. And so the family decided that they had money, right? They had some funding, both their own, substantial their own, and some from the state. So they decided that they would front load a lot of costs. And so for them, that meant getting a house. And so they found a modest house. And I will tell you, the photos don't make it look modest because I used a wide angle lens. It looks like it goes on forever. But they bought a house in Deerfield, right? Got a mortgage for it. And they set up all the, whatever it is, the LLCs and the funding and the board of directors, et cetera, to manage it. And that was the solution for them. They wanted to have something that would exist after they were gone. And so, that's how the project sort of started. And then these are some of Tommy's habits. I simplified them. There was a long list that we'll talk about. But almost everything in the environment triggered him, right? So anything moving outside was just almost too much visual information, noise, right? Smells. He would clear, I'll go over some of these because some people may not know what it means. Clearing surfaces mean that if he walked up here, he would just push everything off, right? He just couldn't stand anything on the surface. He would attack materials. He would do mule kicks, right? He would pick at things. He would kick in registers. He was a very physical kid. He would, what we call weaponizing. So he could pick away at a piece of a baseboard, right? And pull it off, and now he's got a 4-foot-long stick with nails sticking out, right? We had to prepare for that. And it wasn't that he was doing all these things. He had episodes over his first 21 point whatever years, so we had to prepare for it because he was going to go through a transition, right? He was going to go from this place in Massachusetts to Illinois. So he had a physical change, he had a caregiver change, he had everything was changing, right? So we knew that some of this stuff might come back. So we worked with whatever we could. He did pacing. He would walk around a room or something like that when he got very anxious. And then he would do repetitive action. He would, hit a light switch over and over and over and over again. Okay, so we're going to talk about and I'm going to give you a little bit on the house in a second, but here's the overview of the project. Okay, simplified overview. So this is simplified. Like I said, I've got 1,000 checklist points on my projects. So this is simplified. So we have 4 major steps. So we have the concept design. That's where we're all working together, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We have the documentation and permitting. So that's a whole nother process that I go through primarily with other people like the villages and towns. We have obviously construction, and then commissioning. Commissioning will last several years. So we're constantly learning what worked, what didn't for that particular house, and what ideas we can bring out, right? So we're 2 years into Tommy's commissioning. All right, if I break down the design, we first put together the team, all right? So, and I'll show you who the team is on this, and just again in concept. We first put together a team of individuals. That's designers, the family, the caregivers, right? Anybody else we're going to need. We developed the long-term goals. Now this is actually, it sounds like it's, well, I already know what the long-term goals are, or I can't possibly know what they are too far out, right? But in fact, this goes back to the part, this is where people don't take care of themselves, right? If I ask for a list of things, it's all about, in this case, Tommy. And now I need to say, okay, great, we're gonna live with Tommy, therefore we need this. Or we're not gonna live with Tommy, but I wanna have a holiday meal with him. I wanna have, I wanna be there whenever I want. Whatever those things are for you. And it's not the list of how many bedrooms, bathrooms, doorknobs you need. I need that, but what we really need is the best times I have with my son, my daughter, is X. And we want to make, and why is that a great experience? Got it. All right, so let's make sure we protect that. That's part of the soul that we're going to protect, right? That's for you. And what do you need, right? If you're living in the house, what do you need to get away? If I'm renovating a bathroom, how different is a bathroom from a spa? Not much. Maybe you need that for an hour a day. That's okay. We can do that. So we start to work through how do we get to this list of what we want from a performance point of view, both functional, like how you're going to live, and physical, what the building's going to do. And then we also look at how is the house going to evolve. Tommy's going to be in that house for 40, 50, 60 years, right? How is the house going to evolve with Tommy? What do we have to do now to set him up for something later? He's not physically disabled, but I'm going to try to set the house up for physical disabilities anyway, wherever I can, without blowing the budget, right? And then we do a property evaluation, and I'll go over the property evaluation when we look at Tommy's house. Then we do preliminary conferences, and then the focused design session. So I do the FDS with all my clients, every project. And basically what we do, the FDS, right, focused design session, we go into a conference room, ideally leaving our phones outside, and we lock the door, and nobody leaves until we have a solution. It's like that kind of level. Now, we bring in food, and we do all kinds of stuff, and then maybe that's a little bit tougher than it sounds. But what we want to do is get everybody together, undisturbed, focused on how do we come up with a solution. So my process is different than most other architects in that most architects love to design, and they'll come up with 30 designs, and they'll show you the 3 that they're most proud of. My theory is some of the stuff that was left, the other 27 designs might have had something that if you saw that was possible, you would change some of the other things, right? You say, hey, I want that, and I'm willing to trade it off for these things. So and you also know more about what will inspire you than I ever will. So we sit across the table from each other, and we generate the design together. So it's a very collaborative approach right from the beginning. We need a team that communicates beautifully, right? So the preliminary conferences are what leads up to that. So we might need to have long conversations with caregivers, right? And in Tommy's case, that was in 2 different states and half a dozen people on each side, right? And then we needed to have some conferences with local building officials and maybe the police department and the fire department and all these different individuals. We want to kind of do our homework before we start the design. So those preliminary conferences can take longer than the focused design session. It's gathering information. And then we develop a schematic of the house and the routines. So again, this is different. So most of the time when we're doing architectural work, we're only doing a schematic of the house. But in this case, knowing how you're going to do something can affect the architecture. So for example, Tommy has an elopement issue. He wants to run off. So in this case, we needed a house that had an attached garage. So they could pull in, close the garage door, and then let Tommy out of the car, right? Makes sense. And so that actually informed several things. I had to relocate the button to get out of the garage. You know, you can't just have it next to the door because Tommy could hit it, right, and then run out. There were several things we had to put into place with just that little bit of information. Now, they weren't major things, but they make all the difference in the world, right? So we get the routines down. How is Tommy going to go to swim practice every day? Oh, we're going to pull the car into the garage, and we'll close the garage door. And then, you know. Great. Okay, now, next thing, right? How does Tommy do his laundry? Right? And it gets into that level. And so we actually like to go and see and learn from the individual, like just be observers. Like, what does this mean? Because if somebody says to us, well, he clears the desk, you know, it's hard to appreciate to what extent and how that looks, right? So we then start to detail the house. We do the schematic, and then we start to develop it. So again, you know, if we have an elopement issue and the car pulls into the garage, where does that button have to go to make sure that you know, he can't hit it, but the other people know where it is and how to use it? So we work through all those things, and we also can document them. So in a sense, the house has a manual, right? An operator's manual. So that when you have a new caregiver in, they can open it up and see, oh, that's how I open the garage door. Okay, and then we add the contractor to the team. And the reason we usually don't do that earlier is because we don't know what kind of work is needed. And so we want to find a contractor that not just works well in a collaborative team environment, but also can do the things we want them to do. So contractors are great. They're really, I had my own construction firm. And not every contractor is appropriate for every job. There's personality issues, number one, and there's also just what work has to be done. And then we go into documentation and permitting. Okay, so does that make sense from a structural point of view of how the process goes through? Okay. All right, so here's the team. So this is our table, right? And it's a collaborative approach. So clearly, Tommy's family was, you know, the owners of the house. Tommy's family, you know, relatives, anybody who's involved in his world, right? Tommy's caregivers. So this was the Massachusetts team, the Chicago team, any medical people, any consultants, right? And then there was the design team, right? So CHS, does anybody here know George Braddock? Yeah, so George is a genius. He's awesome, right? So George has a child with special needs. Back in the 70s, he started realizing that, you know, back, I think he was in Oregon, might have been California at that time, but he's in Oregon now. And as I recall the story, you know, he had no place he could see that there was going to be no place for his child other than institutions. So George started getting involved, and George was a master carpenter at that time. He's an old, in my view, he's like an old hippie. He's just like, you know, forgive the word old if you're watching this, George. But he's just grassroots, down in the dirt, right? He's like, he figures out how things work by observing and seeing what the solutions are. Very practical, very creative. And so from that, he became a writer. He became an activist. He became, right, all these different things. And now George is involved all over the world, helping different communities provide housing of different forms and different venues. So George is awesome. So that's CHS. And I was the local architect brought in. So I had actually had some experience working in the special needs arena and quit it. I was like, I can't work in this world. And the reason was that the agency I was working with did not want to do anything, in my view, nice. It was all about the numbers of how many people can we get in a room, et cetera, et cetera. And I understood that. They had to make those numbers work. But when they were presented with options that cost no money, if it was anywhere different than what they had ever done before, they said no. And so literally at one point, they wanted gray paint because it's easy to keep clean. And it was all about the maintenance, the management of the facility, and not about the individual. And at that point, you know, my mission just said, I can't do this work anymore. So when I got on this team, I was like, it was a breath of fresh air. It was like somebody put oxygen. You know, I was like, oh, this is what I want. So that's how I got involved. Then, of course, with the others, we have to go talk to various people, right? Vendors in particular. Vendors are people like soft wall. We use soft wall here, so soft wall products and other things to see if they can be used here. So this is the house that we got. So this is the same house. This was the original ranch, or it was not really a ranch. It has a basement underneath this portion. This portion here goes up to about here, right? So that's the street frontage there. And then somebody before us built all of that. We didn't build that, right? We didn't add to the footprint of the house at all. So this looks colossal, right? Looks so huge, but it really isn't. And so this became the front entrance. So on the long side, so this house goes back. This door is really just used by staff now. And this is really the front of the house, okay? So it's on a corner lot. So it's located near, so it was selected very carefully. And so it's near a town center. So there's not just shopping there for the caregivers, right, and others, but there's a place for the residents to find work, right? We're also near transportation, so both for the caregivers and other residents. So this project was designed anticipating that we would have three residents, all right? Tommy was the first one, and then there's room for two more, possibly three more. There's a room that we weren't sure if Tommy was going to need or use. At this point, we designed it so it could either be part of his room or it could be a separate room. So, and again, there's a whole process of selecting it. We wanted to make sure it was away from traffic in case of elopement, right? And bodies of water. Tommy has a great affinity to water, and even though he's been trained to swim, we're always concerned about him getting, or at least at that time, getting to a place where he might drown. So the building positive, it was a ranch. Ranches don't have basements generally. This one has a small basement. It's like 20 feet by 20 feet. It's not big. It's enough for a game room and utilities, and that's about it. The kitchen, and I don't know if you could see it, but the kitchen was in pretty good shape. I mean, it's a functional kitchen, right? Attached garage. It was enclosed yard because we have an elopement issue. And the building was, from a building health point of view, it was in pretty good shape. There was nothing that we needed to go in there to fix, right? So that was all good. Okay, so that rotated. So this will be an interesting slideshow if that keeps happening. That's a shower, okay, on its side. It was not one of the things that was wrong with the building. I don't know why it rotated. But what we had were, when we went through, and I'll go through a bunch of slides here, and there'll be some commonality. One is glare and fragile light. So you can see here, there's a downlight, and they had can lights, downlights everywhere, and these were exposed bulbs. So there was a lot of glare from them, right? And the ceilings are only 8 foot, so I could reach up and touch 8 feet. So the concern was that he would just hit the light with his hand. Fragile, we had pendant lights. We'll go over that in a second. We had breakable glass and windows. So one of the things Tommy can do is do this for a long time, and he could get seriously injured, and he can also break glass. So one of the concerns was he's going to break a window. Also, he could get out of that window. We had a lot of unsecured elements, like the trim around the doors, windows, walls. Fragile doors, we'll go into that in a second. Uncontrolled access through the kitchen. Weak wall and trim construction. It's the same thing where he could kick a hole in a wall or just hit it with his hand. The walls on a lot of suburban homes are 1/2 inch drywall. And even somebody who spends all their day doing this, I could even hit a hole through a wall like that. So Tommy could just go right through it. And then there were blind spots in the layout. You'll see those in a second. So you could just see some of them, like there were blind spots, like he could hang out behind this little partition or behind this wall or behind this, So there was just, from the safety of both Tommy and the caregivers, you can't really have blind spots, right? So we designed it so that from one place, the caregiver can kind of monitor almost the entire building, right? All that's exposed. We went through this. Well, so I don't know why, but the pictures got kind of reversed. So the bathroom, we talk about in the bathroom, we had, again, fragile lights, we had a fragile door and unsecured trim. We had a drowning hazard. There was only a tub in there, and hopefully that slide will come up again. I don't know why these pictures inverted. There was no water resistant. You know, as you know, somebody who really enjoys water, sometimes the water ends up in places other than the tub. And so that room was not set up for that. So, you know, we would have had destroyed, the walls would have been destroyed in short order. Again, the mirrors and the attachments of all the different elements in that room were unsecured. They were standard mirrors. And then the cabinetry was very fragile. All right, so I'll get other pictures of the bathrooms in a second. So this was going to be Tommy's room. And so this is what we found when we got there. This was the master. You can actually see in the mirror the other part of the room. There's, you know, the doors are just standard oak doors. There's nothing wrong with them in a suburban home, right? But all this trim could just be peeled right off, right, and weaponized. The glass, right, is something that could be broken easily. We had outlets everywhere, right, that could be kicked open and pulled at, and there's a shock hazard. Obviously, the mirrors, these probably are tempered, but they're still breakable, right? So we don't want that. Plus, you have doors on tracks and runners, right? So, in the flooring, you know, we have soiling conditions sometimes. So we sometimes, you know, you can't have a floor like this. And you know, obviously a ceiling fan is going to, not only can it just be yanked down or, you know, destroyed, but it also adds to anxiety because you have a moving object in a room. So there were a lot of things that, you know, there was nothing wrong with this room, but it wasn't appropriate for Tommy. You can see the blind spots here. Most of this is the same. You can see how many, we had a lot of these can lights. I think we had close to 60. A lot. These are all before photos. This is where that front door comes in right there. Then you enter this is the original living room. Wow, look at those. Lovely. I'm embarrassed. I don't know why this happened. It doesn't show up on my screen this way. So if you can turn your head. So you can see the lights and the mirrors all acted, you know, are all like easy to tear off and remove, right? It was a little crazy. That's the tub that we thought might have a drowning risk. And it's hard to see, but there are pendant lights there, right? The kitchen was in a sense fine. It was granite countertops and, you know, and we didn't want to change the, you know, for cost reasons, we wanted to modify that. Kitchens can be expensive. So we didn't, you know, we sort of gambled on whether the kitchens needed to be changed, right? So the thought was, what we finally came up with was, all right, if the kitchen gets destroyed, right, then it would have been destroyed when we demoed and replaced it. So let's just see what gets destroyed, if anything, and then if we need to replace it in the future, we will. So the opportunities of this house were Tommy's love of water. So that was one of the big things that came out of the assessment, right, of what inspires Tommy and the family. And the love of water is, we designed something, we'll show you in a minute. Doesn't look like much, but Tommy spends at least an hour a day, sometimes 2 hours a day in this shower, even on the days he goes swimming. So iPads were a great thing. He loved iPads, and so that actually gave us a way of creating different atmospheres in different rooms to help him calm down and be in control. He loves movies, so we made sure we put a TV in that he could watch movies, but in a way that would not affect others, right? Other residents in the house, and they wouldn't affect him. He loves games. The family was nearby, so that was a huge benefit. We had a great caregiving team here in the Chicago area. It took him a long time to get everything right, and there were some episodes, but you know, I don't think anybody could have done it differently, because I think that was just part of the transition. We knew that we could create a track through the house. Because this was essentially two houses that were connected, there were essentially two living rooms with a core in between. And so we were like, hey, we can actually create a track that Tommy can go around because he likes to do this pacing, right? And it had some challenges, but we were able to do it. The basement area was a bonus, so we created that as a game room, and so that was something that they used to reward certain behavior, give him a place to kind of work off a little energy, et cetera. And again, the commitment of the family was they never gave up. No matter, we had some problems on this job, some serious problems getting it built. They never wavered. They're like, okay, got it, we had a major problem. What's next? And they kept going. All right, so I talked a little bit about the track, right? So this is really weird. All these photos are like reversed. Okay, so what we did is there's a track. So there's a door here, right? It goes all the way around the core to this living room, right? The original living room, and then back through. So we designed it so that they could open this door, leave this gate open like this, and you could have a track so that Tommy could do that for as long as he felt he needed to, right? We wanted to give him that opportunity. You know, Chicago, you get 2 feet of snow, you can't go outside and do it. And Tommy was such, it was hard to take him to like a shopping mall or something like that. So we had to come up with our own solution. We actually designed it so that in that old living room, we could actually put a stair in if we thought it was needed. If he started using this a lot, we thought we could open up that living room, put a stair in, go into the basement, and then come out of the basement through here so that we could actually get a vertical track going, right? And really get a good workout, right? Deal with the anxiety that way. And the thought was that because he has some sweeping, you know, he clears countertops, we did a few things. So first of all, having that track go through a kitchen is a little problematic. If somebody's cooking and he has a clearing habit, he could try to clear off a pot of water off the stove, right? And everybody gets injured. So we wanted to block it. So we wanted to find a way to divert it. And the way we prefer to do things is not to put up a barricade. We don't want to do that. What we want to try to do is use his behaviors to direct to something more interesting, right? So one of the things that George came up with was this cabinet here. So this cabinet had a lock, and the caregiver kept inside the cabinet the things that Tommy loves to play with, an iPad, for example, right? And so when they were ready to cook, they could close this door, open this up, and close that, right? And so in that way, we give him something to kind of direct him to something else to do rather than the circuit. And they could then cook. And then we built this area, and I'll talk about this in a second. But you'll notice that it comes up above the countertop. And so again, that helps with the clearing issue so that if he's sitting here, he doesn't see the stuff as clearly. So we're trying to get as much protection as we can. Again, we left the kitchen kind of as it is. All right, so we built a few different seating areas, and you'll see another photo in a few minutes. So again, this is the position, this is the main position for the caregivers, right? Now, it's used for lunches and all kinds of stuff, and there's another table. Basically, from where I'm standing to take this picture, there's another table, the larger one. But from this position, you could see the front room. You could see one of the bathrooms, which is right over here. You could hear what's going on in the basement, and you could see the whole rest of the house, including the door that goes to Tommy's room. So it's very centrally located, and we removed a lot of those blind spots. So there used to be a wall that went right here. Remember I told you there was a blind spot there? We got rid of all these walls. So some of the other changes are we kept the floors, right? We built a little closet here. So one of the things we had to do is there were a lot of speakers, wires, electronics throughout the house. So we really needed to get all those things protected. VCRs, stereos, right? All of them went into these closets here. Everything got wired back there. And so the caregivers with their iPad or by going up to the closet can control the TV, the music systems, everything. There's a fax machine in there, so if they get doctor's orders, all the electronics are together.
What are the raised panels on the wall?
Yeah, I'll explain that. So We put these raised panels here. So one of the things that Tommy, so a couple of maybe remember some of his triggers are noise, right? And that he likes to bang on the walls. So we had some fabric covered fiberglass panels made. And these were really kind of hard to get the right product and to get it cost effectively. And so these are fabric covered panels, right? That are in kind of the primary zone of where he might hit or kick. And so if he goes up and hits and kicks these things, it has a very rewarding thud, but it also protects his arm, and it protects the wall, and it reduces the noise in the room, right? One of the other things we did is this is the TV. This TV is behind half-inch glass, half-inch laminated glass. So you can't actually get to the TV. All the controls are over here, or with a remote control. We took every piece of trim off, right? The whole space, and glued it and screwed it. So it's not coming off. He can't pick away at it. And then we sealed it, right? The joint, we sealed it with clear sealant so he can't even get his fingers in to injure himself. We replaced every light in the building, right? So we put in LEDs. So we didn't replace the can, right? This is a cost thing, right? There's always a way. Well, not always a way, but there's often a way. And so replacing the can lights would have been $10,000, well, maybe closer to $20,000. So instead, what we did is we replaced the inside of the existing cans. And then we sealed each can to make sure he couldn't get his fingers around it. And we put in what were then, 2 years ago, LEDs are changing my industry, and they're still, in their sort of developmental stage. But so we got these lights. We replaced the inside of each light. Each one of those kits cost $12. But it made a huge difference, right? Huge difference in his safety. We took out, we closed this up and we insulated for sound all these walls, right? And then what we did is we put speakers, not expensive speakers, right above the couch. So the idea is we're going to localize the sound so it's right where he's sitting, right? Instead of having a blast through the whole building, because he watches the same movie over and over and over again. The caregivers will go mad, right? So, we did that. The skylights were already in, so we didn't have to do anything with that. The windows, and this was a George idea, and it was brilliant. One of his many brilliant ideas. I didn't know you could do this before I saw this. So we needed to change out the windows because they were hazardous for him, right? And these are vinyl windows. And George was like, we can actually just remove the glass and put the glass back in and put in better glass. And I didn't know you could do that, right? So we actually put in a tempered safety glass that's much thicker. It's still insulated, but it's much thicker. And then we added, we found we were trying to decide which kind of curtains or whatever, and we have designs for different kinds of window treatments that you can't weaponize, right? And if somebody goes and tears them down, you can just it's Velcro and you can put them back up. But what we came up with the owners, this was the mother's idea, was we started talking about plastic film, and she went out and found this stuff. And so you'll see a different picture in a few minutes, but it feels like stained glass. So the benefit is we get a lot of light in, we have some color, right? But you can't see what's going on the street, right? From these windows. There are some windows you can, but not from these windows. What else did we do? We enclosed the thermostat in a plastic thing. This is the first job in my life where I took out the light switches, the expensive Lutron dimmer light switches, and put in 89-cent light switches, right? Because, they had little lights on them. I mean, it's very seductive to Tommy. He was going to be like that. So we got rid of all the light switches. We combined a bunch of them so we could minimize them. We put some of them in the closet where we could so that everything's protected. The floor was oak underneath whatever they had. They had different flooring in a different place, so we cleaned up the oak and left it because that's very durable. We put in a quiet room, and that was originally the laundry, and we took that laundry out of there and we put it next to the door. This is the door to the garage, and so we put it next to the garage door so that when you're coming in, you have the laundry right there. And then behind this room, we put the quiet room, right? So we have a quiet room in this place. And the challenge for me was, how do you put a nice TV on the other side of a wall from a quiet room and keep the quiet room quiet? So we had to do some design ideas. And again, we did it with all off-the-shelf products and common construction. Sorry about the photos. So this is the table. This table will survive Armageddon. If they're raining bombs on us, this is the table to be under. I designed it. It is actually, this base is flush so that Tommy, who walks around barefoot, cannot hurt his feet. But this is a steel pipe that is got channels welded into the structure of the building, or built into the structure of the building. I went after this table with all my might, and I'm not a small person, and I just hurt myself. The table was totally fine. But we got steel plate in there, and it's bolted, and it's beautiful. And all of this, the structure behind it, it's all wood structure, but it is so heavy duty. You could stomp on it, stand on it, tear at it, whatever you want, and it's not going anywhere. We put in, most of these I've already gone over it. This is now the front door. So one of the things with doors is, you would think an oak door would be really durable. And they're not. They're durable for you and me. But when somebody has slamming, they slam doors constantly, or they hang on them or pull on the knot, they won't last very long. So we took out all the doors that was going to be around Tommy. We also took out some of the walls, right? And the drywall, and we put plywood behind it, where we thought he would be apt to kick it, right? So in his bedroom in particular, we did that. All the doors, every door is replaced. These are all now fiberglass doors. So the fiberglass looks decent, right? It's paintable, but it's flexible. It's got insulation in it, and it's flexible. So you could hit it, and it will take a beating. And if it does get beaten up, you can fix it. You can patch it. And they're lightweight, so even if you slam them, they don't slam like a heavy oak door. And we reinforced the door bucks, the frame that goes around the door in certain rooms, like Tommy's room. What else did we do? We put drags on some of the doors, so it's like something to slow the door down. So if somebody does have slamming, the joy of slamming a door is the sound and the vibration through the building. So these are lightweight, so you slam them, and then the drag just doesn't let them close. They just sort of stop. So it takes the joy away, which, sorry for Tommy, because he liked that. But, and the other thing we did is we reversed certain doors so that Tommy could not barricade himself in a room. This is the quiet room. This is the room that everybody says, okay, I just want one of those for myself, right? So soft furniture, the sound panels. This room is not lockable. It has, actually, we made a change. It is technically lockable, right? Because sometimes Tommy can get really violent to a point where he's endangering himself and the staff. There have been some incidents. So we had a long debate. It's a civil rights issue. It's a safety issue. It's all these different issues. And how do we protect it? And how do you make sure that an exhausted caregiver just doesn't, or a bad caregiver, throw Tommy in there for a couple hours so they can go out for lunch, or something. I know it doesn't happen often, but there was a concern, right? So we actually came up with a way to provide a lock. It's a magnetic lock, and then we have a window, a viewer, and the caregiver can sit there and hold the lock in place with their thumb, right? For like an electric switch. As soon as they let go, the door is unlocked. So if they need to have Tommy needs 15 minutes to kind of calm down in the safe room, they can keep him in there until sort of things get safe again, and then they can let it up. All right? So he can't get locked in there without somebody being there watching him. Literally, they have to sit there with a thumb. Doesn't even work if you put tape across it. It has to be a thumb. What's that? There's a viewer. There's a viewer that kind of lets you see everything. And thankfully, this isn't like a regular thing, but it's there if they need it, right? Most of the time, Tommy will go into that room on his own because he needs some quiet, okay? And these are skylights. We added these skylights. And so what we wanted to do is have natural light in that room without there being something he could bang against and get anxious about. So this just looks up at the sky. And we reinforced all the walls and we put sound panels on every surface we could. So it's a very quiet room. You close that room and you're like, oh, it's nice. Sorry about the photos, folks. This is the other view. We have smoke detectors and everything, but these are all special and we have them protected. And we have part of that viewer is we designed a couple of different things. We have a door viewer and we also had we designed one in the corner for a camera. This is Tommy's room. So Tommy has a TV. This is his bed. This is the same room with those mirrors. Remember the mirrored wall? Same room. They used to be on that wall, but further back. We moved it forward. This is a VCR box. You notice these are the closets, right? You'll notice there's no hardware, and they're fiberglass doors. And so those are operated with a mag lock, and we have a key here so that the staff, Tommy likes to take the drawers, first of all, those could be a weapon, right? And then Tommy liked to throw things around. So, so there's a key lock so that they use that to train him. And so they needed it at first, they don't need it now, right? But we have these mag locks keep the doors closed, and they're something like 850 pounds, so you can't get them open, can't get these doors open. But as soon as you turn off the power, they pop open. They just open enough for you to get your fingers in. Sound insulation, we did the speakers above the bed again, the glass. So one of the issues, one of the things we have to deal with is you have this contradiction of getting people out during a fire, right? And how do you prevent elopement? So we had to do special, the windows took a lot for us to work out. We finally got a combination of alarms so that whenever the window gets opened at all, we put stops on the windows, right? So that certain windows he can open up. We have, we extended the enclosure from the backyard to incorporate his room. So if he does get out, he can only go to the backyard, right? So there are a lot of things that we had to do to kind of make all that work. And again, none of those were expensive items. They were all off the shelf. That's just a reverse shot of the main room. You get a sense of what the main room is like. There's the laundry room. We did, so Tommy does his own laundry now. So these are lockable cabinets because they have all the soaps and the chemicals and whatever. A couple of very durable washing machines. These are secure to the wall, so you can't pull them off. We built this, right, as just a cubby for both the staff and for Tommy and any other residents. And then the window and then the staff board. This is the bathroom. This is Tommy's bathroom. So, so this was the shots with that tub and the shower and everything. This is the same room. What we did in this bathroom is several things. So we knew that we wanted to create an indoor water park for Tommy, right? A one-person indoor water park. So Tommy doesn't like these bright colors. We couldn't do a lot of decoration. He wants it pretty, mottled and gray, right? So we worked with the colors with his team in Massachusetts and the family. So the room looks pretty boring, right? But intentionally, we have very specific colors, blues and greens, on the different walls. So it's not one color because we needed him to be able to see, especially as he gets older, see the color differential because it's a visual acuity thing. So what we did, and we needed to kind of monitor him while he's, the caregivers have to monitor him while he's using the toilet. but it's a privacy issue. It's a civil rights issue. So what we came up with was, the toilet is partially hidden away, right? So they can kind of see what's going on and see if he's struggling with something, because he has injured himself by struggling while he's doing his toileting. So we had to kind of, sort of semi-monitor it. The windows are protected now. All the accessories are heavy duty and bolted in. The sink this is a Home Depot sink top, right? And then I designed and we built this base out of steel and other things. So you could sit on it, you could push on it, you can do anything you want to it. You can still maintain things from underneath, right? So it's a very durable thing. All of these are kind of off-the-shelf items. This is a school mirror, right? So it's not breakable, it's actually plastic, cannot be removed from that wall. We put drains in. You'll see several drains. So one of the things with a lot of folks with autism, they like flushing stuff down the toilet. It's very satisfying to watch it go down. And so what we put in place was a toilet that was not only heavy duty, so he could stand on it and jump on it, whatever he wants, nothing can happen to it. But it's in a sense programmable. It's not electronic, it's actually pneumatic, but it's programmable so that we can actually set it up so when he pushes the toilet to flush it, we can actually program a delay. So that if he's really into flushing stuff down the toilet, like sweaters and pillows, right, we can stop that, right, by just taking away the satisfaction, right? So he pushes the button, nothing happens, and he walks away. So he doesn't develop that habit, all right?
Whoa. You said you put it on a timer?
It's not on a timer. It's a toilet that can be programmed for up to a 2-minute delay in the flush.
What's the manufacturer?
Geberet. It's French. Geberit. But it's involved because you have to build it into the wall. It's not something you can kind of retrofit to a regular toilet. What else? Oh, in this case, we knew Tommy was going to spend a lot of time in this room and is going to get wet, right, and stay wet. And so as an architect, you worry about mold and mildew, right, maintenance. So we did a few things. One is we heated the whole floor. We put a heat strip in so that not only is he comfortable, but more importantly, it speeds the drying, right? And then there's a fan right above this toilet, and there's a fan over here, and I put in the most powerful fans I could find. And those are on timers, so the staff can go hit it. And we tried a humidistat. The humidistats don't work in this case. So we put it on like a 60-minute timer. So the staff can hit a button, it goes on for 60 minutes, and it dries the place out. And so they haven't had any problems. And they can also have an option on the timer. Okay, so this is the entrance into the shower area, and it's kind of a U shape, right? So there's another drain there. There's a fan there. It has its own lighting. Here are the controls here, okay? So we designed that so that it's handicap accessible should he ever need it. We designed it so that it's blind. It's got a blind, what we call a blind in it, so it's got a wall there, so that he has some privacy if he wants it, but they can hear what's going on. There's no shower curtain. There's no shower door, right? So, and being that it's handicap accessible for a wheelchair, there's enough room for other people to be there. So one of the things Tommy loves to do is be in the water. So that's when the family wants to be with him. So sometimes they would suit up and go in there and be with him while he's having a ball. So this is the shower, right? There's a little alcove here if they want to put anything in it. There's actually 6 heads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry, 7. So this is something that we weren't sure about because, again, it could be weaponized, but it's detachable here. So they could just take it off, right? And so there are the controls for Tommy to use, and there are buttons, 1, 2, 3, 4. So each of these are controlled by the button next to it, and then this button controls that. So he can push the buttons and turn on whatever heads he wants, right? When my daughter saw this, she's like, "Dad, that's my shower." You know, it's like, just take that shower, you know. So he spends huge amounts of time here. So there's no risk of drowning. He controls the water himself. 1 second. And so the only thing that was, remember I said there was one thing that was not an off-the-shelf product, right? It was the controls for the shower. Because you can't have all these heads firing without a water line like that, right? And a water heater, you know, the size of a Volkswagen, right? So what we did is we set it up so that like he can push these buttons and it turns them on and off, but he can't have all 5 or 6 running at the same time. And that's partially this valving here and some other things. So this, a few of these gray hairs, they're from this shower. But it was a blast. And then the final part of it that I really love, that I don't think they've used yet, is, you know, he loves water, right? So this is called a nipple. So this nipple can be taken off, right? And so you could remove it. You could attach to it a garden toy, like a sprinkler or a, you know, whatever you want. Like you can have anything. So if he has fun squirting water, he could squirt water all he wants. This room is totally waterproof except for the door and the window, right? And we did size the drains to make sure that they took care of everything. So yes, somebody had a question.
Water heaters that heat on demand, or?
In this case, we used a standard water heater. And then due to his enthusiasm, we supplemented it with a second water heater. But they're actually standard water heaters off the shelf. Yeah. There are one, the first one's a 40. I think the second one we did a 50. Yeah, he can go through some water. And I consider this my beta. Like I'm so excited to do another one. Like I want to do one where it's like a splash desk, like a table where it's like it fills up and you could like a giant sink and you could do whatever you want and then you drain it so that we save like a few gallons. Every time Tommy goes in here, this, you know, Lake Michigan drops like an inch.
What was the total size of the bathroom? Because it looks huge from the picture.
Yeah, it does, because I'm using a wide-angle lens. It's really quite tight. I was barely able to get these photos. So this is probably about 3 feet across. Does that give you a sense? Okay. So the total shower area, because it's a U shape, it's like 6.5 feet. I would guess the bathroom is L-shaped. So you know you have the toilet, then you have a sink, and then the shower. So I would say it was maybe, well, it was the width. It was like a little bit shorter than the width of his room. So I would say 10 feet long, and then along the wall it was probably 7 feet, but it's L-shaped. So there's a piece, you know, missing in there. Oh, it's so much fun. There were so many times I was like, I want to go in there.
What was his reaction when he saw that?
So initially he was in there for hours a day. Like hours. Like we actually had the foresight, I think, to put in shut-off valves. Because, you know, outside the room so that the staff could say, okay, Tommy, it's time, and, you know, they would just turn the water off. No, to this day, so he's been in there for 2 hours. He goes swimming, I think 2 or 3 times a week. His family actually moved to a place where they have access to a beach or whatever, so he's got water there because he now knows how to swim and it's safe. And he still spends at least an hour to 2 a day in this shower. It's his thing, you know? And that was one of the things. Like, it wasn't enough to say, well, Tommy likes showers, right? We're like, what is it about the shower, right? Is it the noise? Is it the feeling on the skin? Is it the control? Is it the temperature? Is it, and we really, you know, you could spend an hour talking like that about just one thing. But it's what makes it successful.
Is he verbal?
No. No. So what worked and what didn't? All right, so you may see a little bit of a change here, right? So the gate didn't work in this case. So this is a process you go through. This is part of the commissioning. So we go back and we're like, okay, what worked and what didn't? So during the transition, Tommy had several major episodes, right? During one of them, the staff was so threatened they ran out. They had to leave. So he has eloped a couple times. We fixed that problem because that was more of a locking issue and with the staff. But they needed a refuge. They needed a safe place at that time. Now, I don't think they need this anymore, but we're going to leave it in place for a while. So they could close. This is basically a plywood door. So they could actually close this and lock it from the inside and still monitor what's going on. So right now, that's still in place. So I'm not crazy about it. but it's what was needed. One of the episodes, so we kept the kitchen without a modification. With one of the episodes Tommy has, he went, he had a very serious issue, and he went into amongst other things, he went into the kitchen, and he's a strong guy. So he tore the door off the dishwasher, and he tore the door off the microwave. And he had the microwave door by the handle, and he went after the whole building. So he ran around hitting windows, the glass for the TV, the doors, the ceiling, the floors, everything, all right? It was a major case. They got him under control, and he was actually hospitalized to adjust some meds. And so we had a chance for a few days to go assess and see what was wrong, what we had to fix. It was a horrible incident, don't get me wrong. I mean, it was like, it stabs me in the heart. And I'm very proud of the building, because we had painters in, and 2 days later, the place was back up and running. He didn't break a single piece of glass. He hit lights, he hit the windows, he hit the TV. Nothing broke, nothing got scarred. The doors, he went after with the microwave. We went after a microwave with everything. The fiberglass held up, nothing opened up, he stayed in. And there were dents in the doors, and those are still there, I think. They're not bad enough to have to fix. But we painted, fixed the scrapes on the gypboard, and that was it. He tore off a thermostat, and so we moved. We knew that this could, there are certain things you do, and you're like, okay, this is probably going to get destroyed, but it's such a cheap thing. Let him destroy it, and if we need to, we'll find a solution at that time. Let's just see what happens, because you don't know what's going to happen, right? You don't know what the behavior is going to be. So we had an exposed thermostat. He tore it out and tore out about 15 feet worth of wire too. So he must have like really gone with it. So we put an inline thermostat in the ductwork, solved that problem, so it's gone now. The neighbors, of course, were very concerned because the police cars were there. The HVAC registers, this is again one of those things, there was a, sort of a calculated, it's like, okay, let's just see what happens, because they're $5. So he kicked a bunch of them in, so we now replace those with something more durable. The biggest issue we had was the general contractor. So we couldn't find a GC that could do this work. This requires meticulous work, right? So, telling a GC, see that perfectly good baseboard there, you have to remove it all and glue it and screw it, and I have to approve it, beforehand. That's a hard thing to find. So we had a lot of trouble with the GC. They started disappearing on us, et cetera. And that's why we were delayed a couple months. And this project had its challenges, but a lot of them were with this GC. They just didn't manage it. It was essentially somebody who was used to simpler projects, almost handyman level, and they weren't right for it. That being said, so I became the GC and the owner, and he and I GC'd the rest of the job together. So, all right, what worked? Collaborative, committed team. Nothing stopped us. Nothing. Like, we just kept going. We're like, okay, that stinks. Let's keep going. The one-person water park. All the products were off the shelf. We did really durable design. Quiet room was rock solid. That's been great. The routines, when we broke down what the routines would be, those are almost exactly how they finally occurred. They actually, the staff, the caregivers really did some very thoughtful work. The bedroom design with the insulated walls, the reverse door, the closets, all that worked really well. And that's it.